And then at the end, if you completed all of the different levels, got all the rings, you'd go into this open, expansive space of just nothing. It was basically just the blank screen with ghouls running around everywhere, and you'd have to run and get to the other side. And it was horrifying.
It's time for another episode of Best of the Tour. This is the show that takes you behind the scenes of your favorite gig posters, tour merch, and the artists who bring it all to life. Let's start the show.
This is episode 9 of the Best of the Tour podcast, entitled Winter is Coming.
It is coming.
It is coming. This is actually an artist interview with Richey Beckett, and we'll get to the Winter is Coming part in a bit. But real quick, Richey, wanted to just introduce our listeners who may or may not have followed you in the past, but this I pulled from your website. Richey Beckett is a pen and ink illustrator based in rural Wales. He has lent intricately detailed line work to record covers for some of the world's biggest bands, drawings inspired by biblical and natural history illustrators. He's got a flair of Art Nouveau, and some of the names, just a few of the indie bands, little ones you may or may not have heard of that he's worked for, start with Metallica, Pearl Jam, Jimi Hendrix, The Doors, The Grateful Dead, Foo Fighters. It goes on and on and on. And then Richey's also done some incredible movie posters and official artwork for things like Jim Henson's Labyrinth, which is like a fan favorite, part of my childhood, I know. Mm-hmm. And this was the big one that jumped out to me, HBO's Game of Thrones. And I've seen the Game of Thrones piece, and so I just had to throw The Winter is Coming in there for the episode.
I figured.
But Richey Beckett, thank you, and welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for inviting me on, guys. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, and we were talking a little pre-production about how it's exciting for Mike and I as fans, collectors of the artwork that you do, to be able to have this conversation, peel back the curtain a little bit, and give a little bit of a glimpse into the inspiration, what drives you, and you know what you're excited about going forward, you know, in the industry, because it's such, for us, you know, we collect the posters at the shows we go to, but we also fall in love with artists and then just collect the art as you know, you guys produce it. Well, not regardless of the bands. We had a hard and fast little like, hey, we can't really collect everything because, you know, wall space is limited. However, but when we do fall in love with artists, we tend to just go all in. And so for us to be able to have a conversation with you specifically on not just the gig posters, you know, Best of the Tour is broad. We talk about everything from the gig posters to the art you create to the creative projects that you've got going on as well. But, you know, to kind of get right into it, we're going to have a fun conversation, see where it goes. One take, we're going to just have a chat.
Cool. Let's get into it.
Yeah, let my coffee kick in here for a minute.
I'm on my 3rd or 4th cup already.
If you're like me and Erica, you love passing out stickers while attending concerts with friends, making new friends. Where do you get these stickers? Look no further than stickerrobot.com. They are renowned for the highest quality sticker printing on the planet, world famous, custom outdoor silkscreen sticker printing, free US shipping, and we have a promo for you. If you visit stickerrobot.com/invisible, you will receive 10% off your next high quality screen printed sticker order. So act fast.
Going right now.
Right now.
Right now. And also, thanks to our friends over at the Rock Poster Society. If you don't know TRPS, they are a nonprofit behind the world's longest-running rock poster collection shows. That includes the Festival of Rock Posters in San Francisco, which is a bucket list thing for Mike and I to go to. They have been championing the art of poster for decades. They support both the artists and those people who collect them and preserve them. If you want to get involved, go over to trps.org if you want to become a member and check out their upcoming events.
Check them out. One of the things I want to raise that I think is really interesting with your work, Richey, is that we see a lot of times in the gig poster space, artists that are inspired by the sort of movie poster genre, right? Or, you know, a certain element like science fiction or fantasy or whatnot. But I feel like you've actually done a lot of those posters as well. And so I was kind of curious on where, like, a point of origin for you, like, drop us in as to, you know, was it gig posters to start? Was it movie posters to start? And kind of give us a background there of where you saw that sort of materialize and maybe what your kind of first experience was there, and sharing with our listeners who are collectors, but also maybe some young artists out there listening for their future.
Yeah. Well, so where my mind immediately goes is not so much about. It depends whether your question is kind of my entry point in career terms of when I've started doing that, or whether it's if I go back further than that. The seed of the whole thing to me, what I think back to, is being a kid and scrapbooking movie posters that I found in the Radio Times magazine, the TV guide. I've been thinking about this a lot more right now with the passing of Drew Struzan.
Yeah.
So when I was a kid, when I was very young, I was obsessed with his work and movie posters in general. And it was I'm only now realizing, looking back, it was actually a very private pursuit. It was something that I don't feel I ever really talked to anyone about. I don't remember as a kid ever saying to another kid or my family members, hey, check out this poster by this artist, or check out this poster. Just this private pursuit that I had. And I'd go to the library and get books to try and figure out who these artists were. At first, like I said, I'd scrapbook them. So in the back of the TV guide, you would have these pages, usually advertising VHS releases, and it would just be a page of movie poster covers. But the stuff that we were seeing at the time was obviously a lot of Drew Struzan, things that come to mind, things like the Army of Darkness VHS cover, or any of the horror movies like that movie. I always think about there were some really scary ones, like a lot of horror stuff. One that comes to mind, there was that movie House. I've never seen it. I think it's actually like a comedy horror, but the cover is like a zombified skeleton hand pushing a doorbell.
Yeah.
And I thought it was the most terrifying thing I'd ever seen as a kid. I was like, I'm never going to watch that movie. I mean, I'm probably like 7 years old. But anyhow, I digress. But it's all of that stuff. I was super into it as a kid. I just loved collecting these. I would stick them in a scrapbook of these. So they're so indelibly marked in my aesthetic subconscious, of just visuals for things. And the way I think of it now, and I've been thinking about this a lot, especially with Drew Struzan's passing, thinking about what those movie posters mean. And one that kept coming up that I thought was super cool was just interesting to me is people have been posting, their favorite of Drew's posters, and I did the same. I kind of shared a few. One of them that I shared, that I saw a few other people share, but is not so commonly celebrated, is his Masters of the Universe poster. Now, I remember as a kid,
Dolph Lundgren Masters of the Universe,
right? So, famously a terrible movie in many.
Yes,
in most, it's like famously, it's generally known as a huge opportunity, which was then fumbled and turned into this quite.
That's right. We start out in like Eternia, and somehow we're transported to I think it was LA, and there's this little sort of gnome dwarfy guy that invents stuff and stumbles upon a bucket of barbecue ribs, and it was just like, where are we going with this?
Somehow stumbles into some sort of electronic store, and there's what they think is a weird synthesizer, which is actually a time traveling device.
Yes.
They went way off, but the film was right there to be made, but they somehow conjured up something completely different. But I remember as a kid seeing that film and thinking and realizing it was terrible. But when I see that poster, I forget how bad the movie is, and I'm like, in the back of my mind, this movie still rules. It ruled before I saw it, and it rules again now because I haven't seen it in for 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
My point is that poster is so good and so exciting and so heightened and so much better than the movie. Actually, it presents a better. It's like a judging a book by its cover, but it presents a better version of what that movie is. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that in any regard. I think that's what the poster should show. The movie it wants to be, the movie it sets out to be, or the best version of it. And I like a fantastical, exaggerated version of what this is. And that's what I see the language of movie posters being. And that's, to link it together, that's what I see the language of gig posters being too. I think because gig posters don't even, at least with a movie poster, it's usually something close to what you're seeing in the visuals of the film. The gig poster, could be anything.
A lot wider interpretation. But I feel the same way that you do. I remember being a kid, and I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and this is before Blockbuster, right? Before like the big chain video stores, but the place to go rent. And we actually used to rent movies for a Betamax player, which was the
I was going to say the same here.
Right?
Yeah.
And
so you'd only have one mini stack. You had a huge wall of VHS, but you could only rent the ones from this little.
That's right. It was just a small little thing.
Exactly.
It was the same. It was the same experience. There was this movie called Xanadu. I think it was with Olivia Newton-John.
Olivia Newton-John roller skating.
And the cover of it, right? The movie poster was like, "This looks amazing," and like we read it. I think my parents liked it, but I was a kid and had no idea what was going on and really couldn't follow it.
I mean, it sounds good. It sounds like
Xanadu.
It sounds like Zardoz or something. You know, it sounds like you could be referencing some bizarre, trippy sci-fi movie with Xanadu.
That's right. But, that's right. But you see, like like you mentioned, the Masters poster, right, with Dolph Lundgren and the He-Man, the Skeletor. Like, looks like this is going to be amazing, and it's almost like, were they on the same page? Like, did the writers and the artist have the same meetings? Because the artists clearly got it, right? Like Drew Struzan got it. He understood the assignment, delivered.
Exactly.
The writers of the screenplay, I'm not sure they were in the same meeting. What a catastrophe.
The other notable thing from that movie that deserves attention, and I want to revisit it maybe just for this reason, is William Stout designed the sets for that movie, and Mobius actually worked on some of the costume designs for it.
Really?
Which I think were not fully. It was between William Stout and Mobius both worked on that movie. I'm pretty sure I'm right about this. I know William Stout definitely did, because he also worked on set design for Conan the Barbarian, but he worked on set design for Masters as well. And the thing that's heartbreaking is the amount of work that he put into it, and how beautiful and elaborate and well thought out these, the interior of Castle Grayskull, throne room sets, these sort of things. And then Mobius designed some very camp kind of outfits for, He-Man and Teela and all of that, like very, very kind of old school fantasy guys. And I mean, in keeping with the original He-Man, if you think about it, obviously the campest kind of,
like furry trunks,
barbarians and little pants and all of this stuff.
That's right. Just a furry Speedo.
Yeah. It's almost like, it's not to this level, but it's almost like a Jodorowsky's Dune scenario, where there's this other version of it which almost happened and somehow just fell off the tracks at the last minute, and I think was kind of rushed through, and you got like Frank Langella in that rubber mask, and you can't really articulate much, even though he's the best thing in the movie. And then Dolph Lundgren, who couldn't, not speak in his first language and didn't really seem to understand what movie he was in, but looked great.
But he's probably the closest looking like physical specimen we had to He-Man.
Perfect.
Right?
Yeah.
Right?
It's amazing.
Looks great on the poster.
It's amazing though, like how inspirational, like how much of a foundational inspiration that like the 80s had, things from the 80s.
Yeah.
I see it as a child of the 80s. Mike definitely, line and sinker into a lot of those names, the He-Mans and the Star Wars and G.I. Joe, and like a lot of these, very well-loved brands and names. And now hearing conversations about how inspirational, like the foundations of where those art pieces came from are for you guys as the artists as well. I mean, it's not just you. We've had very deep conversations as well with a lot of artists who are all of our generation. And where would we be without that? And your inspiration is there from like a pinnacle piece, but like it comes from something else as well. Like it's deeper, it's older, I mean, I actually have an art history degree, studied a lot of the artists that you have, on your bio as like being inspired by Albrecht Dürer and, the lino cuts and wood cuts and things of the sort of like, not dark ages art, but like into the Renaissance and, seeing that, like how it is kind of aligned with where your style is now, mixed with fantasy and the stories behind it, right? I think that's such a cool thing, though, to have a conversation about what you see as an artist if you're designing, whether it is the poster or, again, for like a movie poster. It's what you want to show, similar to the He-Mans. Like, I want to show the best of. I want to I want to show you what I see when I close my eyes and think of He-Man and what it would be as the movie, not necessarily the output of it. Because that's how music is too. Like I look around our house and we've got posters for all different bands that we've seen or art that we love. And sometimes it ties directly to like, oh, that band, that location. Sometimes it's like, this is the most badass image that I've ever seen. And I don't even know what it means, but it is so cool.
Yeah, right. That's it. There's the thing that I've always stuck to with movie posters is that in my interpretation of them is that idea that they don't have to represent exactly what is in the movie, and they're very hard to make. I haven't made many movie posters. I made literally a handful of them. I've been asked to make many, even for movies that I love, but I've declined because I haven't had a good enough idea, I think, or the aesthetic hasn't felt right, or for whatever reason, I'm not going to get into it unless I feel I've got a strong idea, something new to show, or something that, exactly like you say, Erica, that's going to expand. It's going to show a version of the film, like the best possible version of what it could be. It's going to entice you and hook you in, and it can represent it in a way that doesn't have to be literal to the movie. And I actually feel that over time, I get not wanting to talk negatively about anyone else's art specific. Well, I'm not talking about anyone specific, but just I see a lot of floating head movie posters going around where people have just been like, oh, it's this movie, therefore we'll draw 6 characters from it. And there's not an idea there really. It's just potentially an extremely good, authentic rendering of these characters' faces and likenesses. But I find that feels like a missed opportunity versus something which could represent a film in a more interesting, abstract way, or also, like you mentioned, it can represent what the film feels like to you, or it can scare you or make you laugh or something like that. A good example that I think about a lot is how the original Alien movie poster that we all know and love with the egg.
Yep.
The fact that egg is nothing like the egg in the movie that Geiger designed. It looks like a kind of weird dinosaur egg with a shell. It's completely different. Nothing in that poster is from the movie. It's not even the egg, but no one ever cared. No one cares. No one's ever mentioned it. It's still one of the greatest movie posters of all time, and it makes you feel scared, and it does everything it needs to do. It's enticing and exciting and mysterious and doesn't really give anything away, but feels sinister and scary. And then with the tagline, that whole thing. And another one I noticed recently along similar line, well, kind of similar, but the poster for Tremors. Have you ever looked at the creature on the cover? It's like some fucking T-Rex looking thing with teeth. Clearly, it's as if they had the poster made before they even finished designing the creature, but that seems ludicrous. I don't know how it happened, but once again, it doesn't matter. When I see it, I'm like, okay, it's kind of like a nod to Jaws with the creature coming up, but it's great. It works. I'm like, yeah,
Jaws made so much sense,
again.
right? Like that was all right, it's a shark, right? Like it's a very big shark, and there's a little, to put it in scale, here's a person swimming across the top of the water. And then you look at that, and if you've ever been in any body of water, you're immediately terrified. Yeah. Right. And
well,
it does that.
Also though, that ties in almost, that kind of you could group that in a category with the Alien poster, because that shark is not a great white. It's like a totally different kind of shark. Right. It doesn't really look that much like the great white. And I saw something recently where they still have the original shark. It's in a natural history museum somewhere that he based it on. And it's totally different kind of, it's a small shark, totally different shape but no, we don't mind.
When you think of the movie Jaws, though, like when I think of it, I think of that poster with the large jaws and then the shark coming up with the body of the lady swimming. Like iconography of things, when we see
that's probably the best movie poster of all time. I think, if I had to say, I had that on my wall for years and years and years. So it was always
it is one of, like, I think of that one. I think of like ones that are Star Wars ones, some of the Star Wars from Empire or,
100%.
Jedi, like.
And again, cool moments or like interpretations of the characters, not exactly what we see on screen, but it had this way of like creating a snapshot, an image that just immediately draws you in and makes your imagination want to be in that sort of setting, right?
Yeah.
And so, like,
yeah, I always loved the Empire. My favorite Empire poster, or my favorite Star Wars poster, is probably the Empire poster where they've done the Gone with the Wind. It's kind of a when you realize what they've done, it's kind of comedic, but they've taken the pose from, the romantic pose from Gone with the Wind, where Han is holding Leia and kissing her in this really ridiculously kind of overly romantic way, which I don't imagine. The funny thing about that poster to me, when I look, and I don't know if it's because I grew up with it, it looks so sophisticated and romantic and beautiful, even though that's quite a ridiculous idea to take Gone with the Wind and put it in Star Wars. But the funny thing is now, if you imagine one of the sequel or prequel, either any of the modern era Star Wars movies, they would never do that, would they? That would be insane. Imagine having that Gone with the Wind style poster for one of those movies. It would be.
I'm bringing it up for Erica so she can see it's this one, because I know exactly what you're talking about.
I do.
When you go and you look at they redid all of the covers of the VHS when they did like the special edition of Star Wars, so it all changed. But yeah, exactly the original. There's like Luke on a tauntaun, right? And there's Vader's head in the distance. That's sort of genius there to like have it just kind of materialize,
just haunting in the background. Yeah.
Right.
And then, you have these little bits in there. It's like Lando Calrissian shooting something. And that guy, Billy D. Williams I don't think he hit anybody in the whole movie. They're Boba Fett in action. He really wasn't in action. But then, front and center is this like Han sort of, Gone with the Wind with Leia. And that's not at all what happened in the movie. Like they were... She either was rejecting him, they were interrupted by C-3PO, or he was being frozen in carbonite. But
at the end of the day, though, that's the imagery. That's like what even though it's not related, in a sense, it's not like the main theme of the movie, but it's what we remember. It's what was like burned into our brains, whether it came from the VHS tapes that we're taking the movie out of, or now it's you're putting it up on your streaming devices or whatever it happens to be. But like for us, this is, at least for me, I can't speak for you, but like for me, when I think of imagery that is tied to movies that are so near and dear to us, like I was, and it's like one of those things where like I recognized your Labyrinth print because I was a kid that I loved the Labyrinth. I loved movies, Jim Henson's like magical, mystical worlds. I that was one of my favorite movies. And I know it's like one of those ones where I watch it back and I'm like, oh, really? Hasn't really held up. I don't know if it aged well.
Yeah. Well, it's something I've been thinking about recently is how these movies, when you're a kid, and if you're and I was the perfect age for something like Labyrinth, growing up as a sort of 80s kid. So I can remember it first time around. I can remember all the promotion for it. It's funny to me that so many movies from that era that now, watching them back as an adult, you realize how funny they are and how silly they are, goofy. But as a kid, you take everything so seriously. The best example for that, Labyrinth, it does all of those things intentionally. It is funny, but I think as a kid, I took it really, really seriously. I saw the humor in it. It would make me laugh, but I thought Hoggle was funny and all of those little, skits that he does. But overall, I took it very seriously. One that I realized as I got older is when I was a kid, I didn't realize that Ghostbusters was a comedy. Like I just thought it was a kind of, if I had to categorize it, it's kind of like action, horror, adventure. Comedy was low. It was on the list, but it was low down the list of how I categorized Ghostbusters. I was like, this is a pretty serious movie about this occurrence that happens and this scary shit that's going on, because that's what's compelling me. So many films. And I listened to a podcast last night about A Nightmare on Elm Street, which obviously was huge amongst teenagers of that generation. As a kid, I just thought that was a straight up horror. Never saw it. Never thought of it as any kind of a comedy or anything goofy about it. I was like, this is deadly serious. I found it really fucking scary. I realized that the later movies got real goofy, but I don't know if that. I guess no, they definitely did. I was going to say, was it just me getting older? But if I listened to this podcast last night where the presenters had only just kind of watched it. They weren't there at the time. They kind of watched it as in a different generation, and they were saying that they were like, this movie's real goofy. It's really silly. It's not scary at all. They really liked it, but they were like, it's not scary at all. And I was like, how can they say Nightmare on Elm Street is not scary at all? those scenes where she's in the classroom falling asleep and Tina's body bag is dragging itself through, even I need to go back and watch it again because I haven't watched it for years. And I'm like, that is scary as hell. Like, I don't understand how anyone
in
can
your
not
memory, right? It's
in my
terrifying.
right.
Yeah, and there are I know exactly what you mean, particularly in the. I mean, I can think of a couple of them in the Nightmare on Elm Street that I would butcher because I can't get them exactly right. But I remember like him popping out of a waterbed and it being like kind of a goofy but scary moment. But I specifically can recall a lot of those sort of comedy relief elements of Ghostbusters, like you said. Like I remember Ghostbusters as having that sort of same tonality of like a Spielberg, Raiders of the Lost Ark, that supernatural sort of spookiness.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
But then you have like Bill Murray cracking jokes like, the flowers are still standing after he tries to, rip the tablecloth off or whatnot. Or Rick Moranis, complaining about no pets in the building when there's this giant sort of like wolf-like beast that's chasing him into the tavern on the green.
That's the cleverness. I think, nowadays, and I'm not into horror movies. Our kid kind of likes them and he'll go watch them and the scary movies in the theaters and stuff. And, I think that now it's like, it's scary it's just scary. There was a genius nature to those 80s, 90s films that felt like it's scary for us as that age of consuming it at that time frame, but also like there was this comic relief that needed to be there because you had to breathe every minute here, like every once in a while you needed that, like, oh yeah, I'm watching something as an entertainment thing, not something that I'm going to have nightmares about. But then you see things that are, we consume all different types of genres of entertainment these days, not just the music and the shows that we go to. But, Mike and I, years ago, he said to me, he's like, I'd like to watch Game of Thrones. This was probably what episode? I think the season they already out like 4 or 5 seasons.
They were through season 3, and it was like right before season 4 was going to drop, and it was like the peak of this buzz around Game of Thrones as a television show. I had missed the books. I hadn't read the books at all, but there were people who had, and then were watching the show to compare it to the books. But from people that hadn't read the books, I also was hearing all this sort of, you might call it water cooler talk or whatnot, just about, oh my God, Game of Thrones is coming back. And I was, what is this Game of Thrones thing? And then at the time, I was, I've since I was a kid, I've been into action figures and collectibles. And at the time, there was this company, Funko, that was doing these sort of bobblehead. They do all these sort of pops, right? But they were launching their first 6-inch, like authentically detailed action figure line, and they picked Game of Thrones, and I was like, all right, what is going on with this Game of Thrones thing? And we picked it up right there. I had been trying, this is how far back it goes, Richie. I was trying to get the Blu-rays on eBay, like buy like a used, could I just get season 1 used? And I was getting sniped at like $30. And one of the stores here had a sale leading into the season 4. It was like each of 1, 2, and 3 were available for $25, brand new on Blu-ray. So I was like, look, what do I have to lose? I can buy it, and I know if I don't like them, we'll just resell them on eBay and make $5 or whatever. And we watched season 1. I would say you had to push through a few episodes. I was hooked. Like, we get through episode 1 of season 1, and they push a kid out of a window. I was like, that's some of the darkest stuff I've ever seen. Where are we going with this? And
it took me a while. I think it was season 1, episode 7. Before I really was like, okay, because he was like, I'd like to watch this, and I was like, I'm not sure about it. And now, we watched the whole series, even subscribed to watch them live, and that's another thing. It's like binge watching is such a big thing these days, where you could just watch episode. But then when you get to the point where they start, back in the day, we used to have to wait once a week. The episode would, And now I think that there's something nostalgic about that, but that brand, Game of Thrones, the iconography, and you had the luck to be able to create one of, I think, to capture a moment from the books and from the show that I think is brilliant from a fan perspective of somebody who not only loves your artwork but also loves Game of Thrones and the sort of the details, but also the uniqueness.
Yeah, it's exactly what we were talking about, right? Which is like,
what we're talking about.
You found this sort of moment in this piece, and it's not a front and center replication of anything we saw on screen necessarily. I can't say that it's necessarily a replication of anything that we would have read in the book, but it's Brandon Stark, right? And it's with
a young Brandon,
one of the direwolves. It's a good point. It's a young Brandon sitting in front of the tree in the Godswood with the three-eyed raven there. So just wanted to pick your brain on that, like what that was like to create and how that opportunity came up, what that was about. And then I think at what point is this, like, do you know the end of Game of Thrones at this point when you do this piece?
Right.
Do you already?
Yeah.
Because
it's interesting.
You pick somebody that's such a central character.
Right. This is what I was going to say. Okay.
Yeah, it's like this highlight, right? Like with the tree and the raven, the warging sort of thing. Obviously the direwolf, but yeah, I have all the questions here.
And spoiler alert, if you have not watched Game of Thrones.
Yeah, I don't even know. Do we have to do that anymore? If you don't know how Game of Thrones ends, maybe watch that. But I'm just going to stop now. Richie knows where I'm going with this, all the questions I have. So just tell us, man, what was that like?
So when I was invited to do it, it was part of a Mondo art show in Austin, and myself and a crew of other artists who were kind of the usual suspects at the time who had worked with Mondo on different projects got invited to contribute. And the thing to understand is that we only had season 1 at this point. So I'm pretty sure I'm getting this right. So I think the art show was to celebrate the launch of season 2. So when season 1 had aired, it hadn't really blown up that much at that point. It was there was some whispers. Like my old flatmate had watched it, and a few people I knew had seen it and were talking about it, but it hadn't blown up in the way that it was going to over subsequent. Only season 1 had aired. I don't know if it had even finished airing because they were lining up for season 2, and they said, we're going to do this art show to celebrate the next season. I feel like most of the artists, I hadn't watched it at that point. I wasn't that familiar with it. I was like, oh, what's this thing? Game of Thrones, I've heard is good. And I think maybe they sent us screeners of it so we could all catch up and watch the first season, I guess. So we had no idea, unless you'd read the book, we had no idea where it was heading. I certainly didn't. The brief was basically, you can make a piece of art that we will potentially then turn into a screen printed poster also. It was quite open, and it was basically, you can just choose any character from the show. So I went in, and I usually try and go with instinct on anything like this. I just not overthink it and go with, I think of it, like if you go into a supermarket and you pick up a grapefruit or something, and then you think, oh, should I get this one? Is this one better or bigger or whatever? It's kind of like I try to train myself now to just go with whatever the first thing was that I pick up, whatever the loaf of bread or whatever. That's the one I'm supposed to have, and just walk away with it and not look at the others. So straight as soon as I watched it, something about Bran Stark's character, I kind of had something telling me like I feel like he might be the linchpin of this whole thing as it plays out. And then as the seasons rolled on and the cast of characters expanded into such a huge world of characters, I was quietly satisfied that when it came full circle, he was key to so much of it. But for me also, it was kind of just an aesthetic choice as well in terms of what there's so much in it that would have been cool stuff to draw. So that was also why I just went with my first instinct and kind of pushed all the rest of it out and was I'm not gonna think about all this other cool shit I could draw. Just something about this character is appealing to me. And I think part of it was just Bran, as a little boy at that age, he had that look almost like he was from one of those old kind of Walter Crane fairy tale books or something of that sort of golden era of fairy tale illustration. He kind of has those features, kind of sort of cherubic, or someone, I don't know, like something of that sort of the golden era of fantasy illustration from the fairy tale side of things. Something about his look just made me think about that, and that's something that I've always been super into and compelled by. So The other leading thing is just go with something that you generally feel you're going to be excited to draw, and it could be someone's face, it could be something else. But I was like, yeah, I feel like I'll enjoy drawing this kid's face. He's got this really dark eyes and this kind of melancholy to him, and so that was the reason I chose him. Really, was just I just wanted to draw this kid. I think the other thing that is I can't really deny is that at the time I was, as ever, super inspired by Vanya, who's, if you're familiar with his artwork, his characters are always kind of looking the viewer in the eye. They're typically just staring, breaking the fourth wall, just staring straight out of the illustration or poster, which I haven't done so much since, I suppose, or so many other times so much. But in that one, it was a very distinct nod to that inspiration, to have it be a character just staring right at you, which is kind of and does something specific in terms of engagement with the character.
It really brings you in, right? Like it causes you as the viewer to feel like you're sort of in a moment maybe that you're not supposed to be in.
Mm-hmm.
Almost.
Yeah. And I think that's that breaking of the fourth wall, like Richey was saying, that you've got this sort of like boy hero look to him, right? And it's him and the wolf looking at you, and sort of we're observers, but at the same time they can kind of see us and make us part of it, which is, there's this whole other layer there. I mean, the brilliance, like Richey, like he said, he had a tuning fork there, but there's this whole other layer that, like, specifically the character of Brandon Stark in the story becomes the Three-Eyed Raven, which is this sort of wizard-like character for those, if you've been living under a rock and don't know what Game of Thrones is, but it has this ability to sort of like, transcend time and space and go and observe parts of history that other people don't know exactly what happened. And so to have this now and look back on it and say, it is this sort of breaking of the fourth wall, but that is the basically one character. I mean, you can get into this debate of, is Brandon Stark the new Three-Eyed Raven, or was the Three-Eyed Raven that passed the mantle to him just an older version of Brandon Stark? And then that gets into a really cyclical sci-fi, like what came first, the Terminator, or what? But barring that, this is one of two possible characters that have that ability to break time and space, and to have him front and center sitting there looking at you. To me, it almost says like we're as much a part of that world, that story, that history in some way as they are, which is, again, I might be reading too much into it, but it's just such a incredible piece to me that way.
The other thing that was taking back to working on it, I had a vision of what I wanted it to look like, him at the center, having the direwolf next to him, and once again really leaning me into making the direwolf over. I mean, they are huge, aren't they? But really exaggerating the size of it. And the one thing I remember battling with a bit was that obviously at this point in the story, his legs are broken. So some people had said like, oh, how is he sitting up? It's like, well, if you look at he's kind of just perched there, Like if you didn't know the story, you would just think he was just sitting under that tree. But if you knew it, it's almost like this, another interesting bit of dialogue there, that someone who knows the story is going to look at it in a different way, because they'll be like, oh, I know that this kid cannot get up from this place, so some
in the detail work,
things hidden
just from an artistic standpoint, what did you use as far as your medium to create this piece? Because I know you use a lot in like lino cut or like pen and ink.
It would have been probably, I think I used like repeatograph pens, just technical pens with refillable ink in them. I've varied it up over the years. I've used microns for a long time. I've used repeatographs for a long time. And then I also have used dip pens. I think at this point, thinking back, I was using microns and repeatographs. I don't think I'd moved on to the dip pen at that point. But it's so much, technique-wise, it's all much the same. It's just that
and just the detail. I mean, to be able to pick a dire wolf, which then has this incredible, like the fur, and then it looks like the wind is blowing with the cape, the fur coat. It's
cold. It's cold in the north.
It is cold in the north.
The winter is coming. I just think it's incredible. The little bit of red in there that you have from the leaves for the god's wood, and the sort of bleeding eyes of the tree, and then for those trees to be so important and impactful in the story. And then also breaking the fourth wall up in that tree, you have the three-eyed raven sitting there.
Yeah, he's perched up there, isn't he? Yeah.
Not just a random,
Right.
somebody sent a raven. It's like the perched three-eye raven.
Yeah.
So the subtleties, and it just feels like exactly what we were talking about, like these opportunities to explore a snapshot that maybe isn't otherwise in screen.
Yeah.
Man, did you nail it. And may I also say,
so
I think you made Brandon Stark look even better, like as a heroic,
Such a badass.
Well, that's it.
moment.
That's it, isn't it? That's the nature, like we started on your posters. Make them, heighten it. I think that's my gripe with, just going back to that. My gripe with a lot of movie posters, like, why wouldn't you make everything look a bit more dramatic and then it can be anything. So why not heighten it, make it more exciting and interesting? And that's always what I've tried to do. I did similarly with. I do want to go back to the Game of Thrones one because I got some other thoughts on it. But the one of the other movie posters I've done was one of the few that I have done, which I think worked out, was the Army of Darkness poster, and that is another one where, to me, that's an example of, I wanted to make it look. I love that movie, but it's obviously, that is a very goofy comedic movie. It's supposed to be. But what I thought would be fun with that, my intention was, especially with the character of Ash, is make him look like the way that he thinks he looks in the movie, or like a more serious, even more heroic, kind of exaggerate that side of him even more and make it look even more ridiculous, but it kind of more serious as well.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that stuff's fun to play with, and that's where movie posters can work the best. And also, I was thinking earlier when we were talking about the Jaws poster, the Alien poster, these things. When it's successful, you cannot and should never have to separate the poster from the movie and that overall whole experience as a whole. Because very often you'll see a movie and you will never. The poster is always there in the back of your mind. And when you think about the movie, or you tell your friends, "Oh, this is one of my favorite movies," you might be thinking about the poster too, and it's part of that whole fabric of the experience of it. I don't think it has to be a separate thing. And there are definitely incredible movies out there which have had posters that have done them a disservice and who maybe have affected the movie in a negative way. And there are other movies which are maybe not great but have incredible posters which have then lifted them up a little bit. But
I'm a big book reader, and there is a whole classification of people who choose books based on the cover.
Yeah.
Like,
how could you not?
I might not know anything about it, but when I see a certain cover, I'm like, ooh, I want to read that. I don't know anything about it. And then there's a book that's an incredible book, but the cover was very criticized and people didn't want to read it because they didn't like the cover of it. And so the author actually redid the cover now to sort of, I think it was a little like, not an appeasement maybe, but it was sort of like, let's change the cover to see if actually it will help to increase readership by people's own internal bias or whatnot. Yeah. But I think that is an opportunity to be able to say, don't judge a book by its cover, but also judge a book by its cover.
Yeah, well, to pull in, right?
It is a part of it. It is a part of the whole experience. I was something that came to mind as well just now is that, and Mike, I feel like this is something you're going to identify with a lot also, is specifically growing up in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s with computer games. This is where it tips even further that way, because I grew up, we had the Commodore 64 where you'd have to load the game on a cassette. We had a drawer full of cassettes. We'd be loading computer games, which would take half an hour to load and then often wouldn't even load at the end of it. You'd have to start over. And like, kids now, they have no idea, do they? Like, I can remember the first time ever having a game on a cartridge, and I could not believe that it was possible to just plug it in and play the game. That just seems so insane to me.
We went from these like floppy disks that worked sometimes and then didn't to the cartridge. Crazy. And then if it didn't work with the cartridge, you just had to pull it out and blow on it and then put it back in and it worked. It was amazing.
Cross your fingers. And with the tapes, I used to have, often you'd get a tape, especially the ones you get free with a magazine, where there'd be like all these bumper editions where you get like 20 games on a tape, but then you'd have to write down the time code and just fast forward to it, and it would be at like 0:32 on the counter, start playing it from then, hope it would load. And some games was, because they'd so rarely load, that then they become so precious that if they ever did load, you'd never want to turn the computer off because you never knew when you were going to get to play it again because they were so temperamental. But what I was thinking about this the other day, is that some of those games, the very early Commodore and Spectrum games, were so primitive, but they had graphically they were so primitive. But the covers of the cassette, the games on cassette, were these super high level fantasy art painted covers of the absolutely highest level often. Of an interpretation of what the game is. And once again, sometimes those covers were so fucking cool and looked so great that you'd be like, this is the game I'm playing. Even though what I see on screen is a stick man wandering on a maze, the one that comes to mind immediately, I don't know, this was not like a hugely popular game, but kind of mid-level, I suppose. There was a game on Commodore 64 called Halls of the Things. If you look at this game up for like a screen grab, it's literally a black screen with a green maze, and a little white, literally a stick man made out of 4 or 5 pixels. Wandering on this maze, you're collecting. There's no sound, which makes it really scary. It's genuinely like my whole family would play this game and be so scared because there's no sound. And then these little ghouls will come around the corner out of nowhere in silence to kill you. But they're just these little purple pixel blobs.
Yeah.
You know, there's nothing to them. And you'd collect gold, and occasionally you'd collect a brightly colored ring, and then you'd get to the next level, and you'd go up this staircase and in these different rooms and explore them. And then at the end, if you completed all of the different levels, got all the rings, you'd go into this open, expansive space of just nothing. It was basically just a blank screen with ghouls running around everywhere, and you'd have to run and get to the other side somehow. And it was horrifying. But the cover of it showed it was this adventurer coming up this staircase, firing a bolt of lightning out of his hand towards this ghoul at the top, and he had bow and arrow on his back and a sword in his hand, and it was like
fully
a sort
kitted out.
Yeah, like a Boris Vallejo style fantasy art masterpiece of this guy coming up the staircase. And you could argue that everything in this image is true. It's like, yes, my hero does have a sword, and there is this ghoul, and there are all these different chambers. Everything in there is in the game.
Amazing.
But as an entry point to the game, when I'm playing it, I'm looking at that being like, fuck yeah, this is the thing.
Right.
You know?
The one that comes to mind for me here in the States, we had one, this was like on the early Apple product, right? Like before it was like Macintosh, before it was like Mac, it was Apple. And there was one called the Apple IIe. And this was like the computer we had in our home. And, you know, it was learning vehicle and all these things. But there was this game that my father spent, I mean, countless hours on. I played it too, but it was called Load Runner. And Load Runner was this exact, like on the box, because these discs, you know, you had to load these things with floppy disks. And just like Richie's saying, sometimes they worked, sometimes they didn't. Some days you reboot the whole computer. It was kind of a mess. But the cover of the game was this like heroic Indiana Jones kind of like character, you know, swinging through the air with a bag of gold and all the gold falling out. The idea was he was this sort of like, you know, high stakes archaeologist, like, you know, grave robber or something, or burglar of some type. And you had to steal the gold and get away from the people chasing you. But then when you load it into the system, it was just these blue blocks that this little tiny white cursor guy ran along, and he was chased by these little red cursor guys. And like you'd have to drill holes into the floor, but it had nothing to do with the cover of the. I mean, loosely you can imagine my little white blinking character is this heroic.
Isn't that the magic of it though? Like, isn't that kind of what we're talking about here? Is that like, and I'm not saying the generation, our kids' generation, they'll know, like they'll never know, they'll never have that moment where they have to. Not saying use your imagination or take the artwork that was given to us and then be able to create those worlds in your own mind. Then when you see them on the screen, it didn't matter if it was a dot. It didn't matter if it was a stick figure, because in your mind, you were that heroic, you know, badass warrior that is like slicing through the ghouls.
Because if you imagine, Mike, if someone came to you as a kid then and gave you this game on tape or disc and was like, hey, you got to check out this game, Load Runner, and you just chucked it on and it was just the game, you hadn't seen the cover, you'd be like, what am I even looking at here? You know, what's going on? Whereas with the context given to you by that cover as the portal through, then you're like, okay, I'm prepared for this.
Yeah.
And think of all the games they sucked us into to buy. That was like, oh, this is going to be amazing.
Yeah,
Look at the cover
great.
of this game. And then you load it. This is
Surely
total crap.
that doesn't exist in the same way now, because we get these, dramatic. I know nothing about the current climate of gaming. I haven't played a game for decades, but I know that they have these really cinematic trailers, and the quality of the promotion of it is going to represent pretty much the gameplay because it's on a par. They don't really have to do what they used to do there, but there's something so charming about that idea of them being like, okay, yeah, we've made this game. It looks like this, but can you, the artist on the front end, be like, you need to make this look really fucking cool.
Right.
Make it look a lot
Something
better than
totally
it
different,
actually
right?
is.
I know.
It's great.
Well, and it's wild just to see, like, even though taking the conversation from what we grew up with and inspired to, like, a lot of your work is gig work, and we've had like a really dense conversation about lots of different things here. So, talk to us a little bit about, like, now this gig work world, posters that you've created for I mean, when we say like iconic names, iconic musicians, Metallica, Pearl Jam, Queens of the Stone Age is one that I see a lot of your work with. And, these are names that we know, we love, that are just, you've created an additional iconography that then, for us as poster collectors, like Mike talked about earlier in the conversation about, like, waiting in line for the poster to see the bands that we love, there is this, like, extension and enhancement, I think, when you are somebody who is as obsessed with the artworks as we are. But for you to be able to take also these, like, just unbelievable iconic names and bands, are these bands that you also listen to as a fan, or are you somebody who, is inspired by to create iconography for that, similar to the conversation we were having earlier about movies and how do you leave, a memory with the collector to take home after that experience of the music?
Yeah, there's definitely a decision to be made when you're working on something. If you're in the privileged position to be able to pick and choose what jobs you do and to be able to be selective, then I appreciate that as a privilege, but I take that quite seriously in terms of trying to work with bands who mostly, yes, it's bands that I love and listen to and want to work with because of my own personal history with them potentially. But but otherwise, it's just really about picking a band who maybe they have an existing visual world that I'm compelled by and feel like I could have some sort of dialogue with that makes sense, or a band who I just appreciate how they operate, or it could definitely be possible to work with bands who you don't necessarily even listen to or like, but have.
That's the thing is, like, we've talked to a lot of artists about being contained by maybe some iconography that you need to use versus having the full freedom and artistry to be able to do what you want to do.
Yeah. The one that jumped out to me, and Erica's going to hit me because I keep bringing things back to Masters of the Universe, and I don't totally need to.
You got to do it.
I know. I mean, you've done for some of these bands that we love, like Pearl Jam, and even Metallica holds this sort of special place in my heart because I had a roommate in college that was like the biggest Metallica fan I'd ever known, and that was where I really learned about Metallica. But you did this one piece, I think it was in 2018. It's a Metallica. There's a title, at least I've seen put on it, called Moth Into the Flame. And if I'm getting that wrong, let me know. But it's sort of like this. I've seen this so many places for Metallica. And it's this overhead shot of what looks like maybe a moth, maybe kind of crashing into the Metallica logo. But it also has, to me, I see, it's sort of like a Rorschach drawing, right? Like, what do you see in it? And to me, it has this like real cool, almost nod to Castle Grayskull too. So that was the one question.
Yes, I totally see that. Yeah, I'd never thought of that myself because it's got that kind of uplit kind of. I think it's got a kind of horror lit from below situation going on. That one, I think, thinking back the origin. Sometimes you want to go really deep and complex and make something extremely complicated, and I think other times, especially with Metallica, it's because they have such a rich and well-established visual aesthetic based on all of the old Pushead artwork and
Mm.
early record covers, but especially the Pushead work when it comes to t-shirts and posters. There's a tendency in where you might feel as an artist, I can't just go and draw some gnarly skulls wrapped in bandages because it's going to look like Pushead. I need to shift it away to something new, or I need to reinvent what Metallica looks like as a visual identity. And I've seen over time, as more and more artists in our circles have been making posters for them, and they've been rolling out these huge, over the years now, they've been rolling out posters for specific songs. Now they're doing, like going through the whole back catalog, picking out songs, making posters for them. It's super cool. They do posters for every show. And it's been interesting to see how different artists have tackled it. And some of them have been, I guess, thinking, oh, we're going to try and make something that looks very different to what people associate Metallica looking like. The thing with that, sometimes I don't know if I've had those thoughts myself too, and I don't know if it always. Sometimes it just doesn't work. Like I think sometimes there's nothing wrong with being in conversation with the Pushead artwork and being like, okay, we're not going to pretend this doesn't exist. This is ideally you want to see a big fucking skull on a Metallica poster
somewhere.
Not every
Somehow.
time, but most of the time. Like 2 out of 3 posters should have a skull in them. It's like that's just the visual language which is so established with that band, and obviously it's a tried and tested formula in heavy music in general and all that stuff. But with that Moth poster, I think my idea came from just I was thinking about the death head hawk moth, which has the pattern of the Silence of the Lambs moth,
yes,
which has the little pattern of a skull that looks like a skull on the back of it. I think I started with that, and then I was going to draw something like that, and then I was like, well, the skull is already kind of most of the body. Why not make the whole body the skull? And that's where it came from. It was just like exaggerating that visual of the death head moth and just making the skull bigger and bigger until I was like, well, now the whole body is a skull. I'm just going to do that instead and put wings on it. And
it's fantastic.
I drew that one on clayboard, which means you have the ability to kind of draw and redraw and scratch back into it. And I remember I spent way too long working on it because I kept reworking things, and it's like the actual original of it is just gouged away and with all of these kind of textures where I've just like scraped into it and redrawn it, and it's got real messy. But yeah, got there in the end.
But also goes back to what you mentioned earlier, which was going with that like instinct, that first instinct that you have, not to overthink. And that's the thing I think, subjective art is very subjective to the viewpoints and to the experiences that we've had, to be able to interpret it. And what Mike sees is something that's different than what I'm going to see, is what may be different than the intentionality that you had as the artist, which I think is the most brilliant thing about a piece of art, when you can sit with something and have multiple interpretations of the same image, is one of my favorite things to do with the art that we collect and the art that we see.
Yeah.
But to be able to then,
But it all sort of stems from the same place, right? Like Richie's saying is, the skull has become such this sort of like icon to go with Metallica, a band that sort of came out of the sort of 80s kids that we were. And at that same time, we were indoctrinated, for lack of a better term, with like, hey, here's your playset as a child. It's a castle, but it's really a giant skull, I think of like the Phantom, right? Like the hero of the Phantom, like he's from Skull Island, and things like this. And you go back further than that into the serials of like the 30s and the 40s of, that sort of like barbaric, something very elemental and primitive, about the skull as the icon for a lot of things in rock and roll, in metal, everything 80s. I mean, it's just always it's been there. And even if you go and you look at like the helmet of Darth Vader, right? Which is sci-fi, it's space, it's fantasy. But that is, sort of take that shiny blackness away and just put a like overcoat of maybe bone with some dark wash or something.
Glass.
And it's got a very skeletal sort of primitive look to it.
Right? So much. Yeah.
And I know that we're kind of coming up on our time with you, Richie.
Yeah.
And I feel like we need a 2.0 conversation, because
I have so many. There is so much more conversation to be had. There's so much we haven't even scratched the surface of. And then there's also, everything we've talked about, there are all these little side alleys that I was like, oh man, I wish we could have got to this and this and this. There's so many things we could
That's
have
right.
See,
could talk about.
We have to, we got to like rein ourselves in, or else we'll have like 8-hour episodes, like marathon podcasts. So,
yes. But we would love to have you back and just continue this conversation. I know I would. Erica's like more He-Man talk, really? No.
We need to just do one dedicated He-Man
That's
conversation, and then we can.
He-Man conversation. I mean, I could talk She-Ra all day. Princess of Power. You had the girl version of the He-Man, marketed to us, that now has turned into, I think, if, I really wanted to get into a conversation about how She-Ra is the pinnacle of all of the female main character, lead characters of all the like fantasy books that I read now. So, I mean, we could have an entire conversation about the apex of where that comes from.
But also the fact, the origin of He-Man, which was basically that was originally a Conan the Barbarian toy, that then they realized they couldn't sell it to kids. So that's why He-Man's body, if you look at it, is Schwarzenegger's body.
Right.
Like,
that's
crazy.
right. And
then the fact that He-Man was realizing from watching those documentaries as an adult now that He-Man the cartoon that we all loved as kids was just a toy advert to sell us.
That's right.
Like reverse engineered to sell us the toys. And I know that some people have been like, God damn it, they got us. But to me, I'm like, it worked and I loved it. I have no regrets, not holding any grudges against anyone.
Bring it back. I loved it. Everything about it.
Well, our next episode next episode we'll just call it Masters of the Universe, and we can geek out over the amazing expansion of what that franchise brand has been, and now even today where it's at today in the world of collectorship and inspiration.
In the meantime, Richey, is there anything? Well, first of all, where can folks find you on the interwebs so they can look at your shop, look at your
I'm pretty
pieces?
easy to find because of Richey. I didn't realize when I changed the spelling of my name when I was a teenager to Richey with an EY on the end, and I didn't realize at the time how unusual that spelling was. But it served me well because if you search for it online, it's pretty easy to find me on account of that. So just Richey with an EY, Beckett with 2 T's on Instagram or .com from my website and store, or anywhere else. So that's my main. Instagram is where I post most of my work, and I don't really keep my website, like everyone's the same now. And I was like, don't really keep my website that updated, There's a gallery of work on there and links to the store and things like that. And there's posters and prints available. Then, Instagram is where most of it's kicking off.
Right on. And any upcoming projects in the end of 25 as we wrap up year or beginning of 26 you want to mention?
I have. So by the time, when this, I was trying to think when you end of November.
End of November.
By the time this,
end of November.
By the time this episode is published, I think I will have what day is it released? I have a new Metallica poster coming, and I haven't done a piece of work for them for a long time, and it's another song based poster. I can't off the top of my head think. I know it is around this time, so I think it will have come out by the time this is published. But somewhere late November, I think is there's going to be another Metallica poster coming out, and I have more. I'm working on a series of pieces with them right now.
Very cool.
So I literally have one on my drawing board right here that I've been working on this morning. So that's happening, and then I have, as always, it's stuff I can't really talk about. It's like movie posters, but I can't reveal what they are. Working on some more Metallica work. I'm working on a couple of movie posters, both of which I'm extremely excited about. Both movies that I deeply, dearly love, like 2 of my favorite movies of all time. That I'm doing posters for from very different time periods and very different styles. And then I'm also doing a big sort of fantasy art project that I also can't talk about, but it's more in line. But when you mentioned at the top about, we spoke beforehand and mentioned about the sort of fantasy art, Dungeons and Dragons kind of side of things, and you guys were talking about Game of Thrones, of course. It's more in that world, it's more like fantasy stuff,
cool.
which is very much what I grew up inspired by as a teenager, being into Warhammer and all of that stuff. It's really what I was drawing the most as a kid. So it's the one thing I haven't really it's full circle. I haven't really tapped into that in the gig poster world or apart from Game of Thrones. So yeah,
Very
that's what I
cool.
got going on, and which is an exciting. It feels like something kind of new, even though it is the full circle thing. So yeah, all of
That's
that.
amazing. Well, Richie, we will definitely have to do a 2.0 and a 3.0 episodes to have you come back on Best of the Tour. We hope that listeners out there go check out Richie's work. I think this is also a great time to support your artist, to pick up pieces for holiday gifts if that's something that you're into doing. So please visit Richie's website to see what he's got in the shop. Keep an eye on the socials. And Richie, thank you so much for joining us. And we look forward to another conversation with you.
I would love that. Thank you guys so much for having me. And thanks for everything you do in, as I kind of mentioned this earlier, but it's so important to have people like you guys who are sort of champions of the scene, you know? To have that conversation and dialogue going back and forth and is what keeps it all ticking over and keeps it interesting and exciting, and it's extremely valuable. So thanks for having me on, and thanks for
thank you so much. We're honored to just be here and be giving some space to you guys, because we're just geeking out. This is just fun for us. Thank you, Richie.
Thanks, Richie. Have a great day.
Let's do it again soon.
Absolutely.
Too. Cool. Thanks, guys.
All right, Best of the Tour listeners, it's time for the Tour Tracker.
Your guide to the shows you don't want to miss. Hey y'all, one of the hottest bands in poster collecting is 311. They are currently on an international tour down in South America through the end of the year. But what I want you guys to take a look at is that March 7th and March 8th, 2026 in Las Vegas, Nevada for 311 Day. For a show near you, head on over to 311.com/pages/tour to go get some tickets and see 311.
Y'all know Billy Corgan, singer, songwriter, guitarist, founding member and frontman of the Smashing Pumpkins. Well, he's currently doing a really unique gig teamed up with Lyric Opera of Chicago for, quote, a night of melancholy and infinite sadness, end quote, running now in November of 2025 through the end of the month in Chicago, Illinois. Check out lyricopera.org for all of the tour dates or smashingpumpkins.com/tour.
And that's your tour tracker for this episode.
Have fun out there, and we'll see you on tour.
Best of the Tour is presented by Invisible Industries. Find us at www.bestofthettour.com and on all major streaming platforms, including Spotify and Apple Music. You can also catch Erica and Mike on their other podcast, Posters in Every Direction, streaming wherever you stream your podcasts from. A big thanks for listening, and we will talk to you next time. If you're digging the stories that Erica and I are bringing you, and if you'd like to keep these podcasts going, please consider tipping us in the tip jar at buymeacoffee.com/bestofthettour. That's BUYMEA coffee.com/bestofthettour to support the podcast. Thanks, y'all.
Are you looking for some ways to get inspired and make some creative magic happen? Then you need to go stock up on art supplies. Head on over to bestofthettour.com and hit our Blick affiliate link. It's the same price, supports the show. Go check it out.
If you're like us, you love supporting the independent artists who make the art for the posters we love. So if you're looking for a new poster, look no further than shop.invisibleindustries.com. You can find their print collections, including art prints, limited edition prints, remarks, original works, and much, much more.
So go on over to shop.invisibleindustries.com to go check out what they've got in store.